Hello, everyone, and welcome to Calm and Clarity Conversations, where we believe that calm, clarity, and focus is the only path to true momentum and that people truly matter most. Now, as it turns out, momentum is also helped along greatly by cash flow. And cash flow into a business means dealing with banks and financing and loans and things like that. And for many of the people that I talk with, that's a pretty scary conversation, but not for my guest today. How many people do you know who you can say are the very best at what they do? I am fortunate to know a few, and even more so to have one of them with me right now. Michelle Brasseur is the single number one most knowledgeable and best supporter of entrepreneurs in the banking realm that I've ever met. She has helped local business owners here in Southeast Michigan, including a few of my personal clients, turn maybe into approved in ways that transform their worlds. And to see her vision of not only how to help others, but also the vision she shares of youth and vitality and even successful triathlon participation, you would never know that she has decades of experience in this business. At least you wouldn't know it until you felt the wisdom the minute you sat down for a chat. And I'm so grateful we get to do that right now. Welcome, Michelle.
Well, thanks, Dan. Gosh, you don't disappoint. That is a gushy intro. Thank you.
Well, every word of it is true, and I'm
Thank
grateful
you.
to have you here. I think back to when we first met. I there's sometimes when you look across a room, you can just truly see the light of somebody and the impact that they're able to have. And from the moment we first met, I was like, that's the lady. She's got it. And I love that you do, and I've been very appreciative of our connection since that time. I'm curious now when you do a lot of things. I listed a few of them, but when someone asks you what you do, how do you answer?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, there's so many different versions of me, versions of the truth. There's the me, like the personal me, which is, a wife, I consider myself an athlete, an avid gardener, a mother of two fur babies, two dogs. But then there's also the career path me. So it's a big part of who I am. I'm a career commercial lender. I've been a commercial lender for better than 30 years. And so, it's a big part of who I am and a big part of my passion. But it doesn't stop there.
I love that you say it doesn't stop there. So many people, their instinct in that answer, and it was mine for a long time, is to answer the job that we do. But you're like, hey, there's depth. I recognize it. And to that end, you gave a lot of labels a minute ago. But when you're by yourself, when it's just Michelle out there sitting, how do you think of yourself? What is that identity to you?
I honestly, I don't try to put a label on it or things of
Yeah.
that nature. I think that it's so easy, as competitive of a person as I actually am, putting labels on things sometimes can be a dangerous thing because then you're putting, instead of really thinking through what's important to you, you're worrying about how you measure up. And so, as I get older, I I'm enough, and so I try not to worry about those things. So I'm not obfuscating the question, but I just feel that I'm enough.
I don't think you obfuscated the question at all. Actually, I think you answered it really well. And I love that resonance with I'm enough. That is so powerful and an answer that I would hope all of us could get to a spot in our life where we could give. That's really beautiful. Uh,
Thank you.
you do all these other things, the gardening, and your garden is the garden and the things that come from it are gorgeous. Your dogs are amazing and they're like the cutest things ever. And you run, you did this triathlon. What resets you the most? What gives you that, okay, it's been a day. Here's the thing that helps most. What is that trigger for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends if I'm physically or mentally exhausted, or maybe just, need to blow off some steam before I can be the best version of me for my family. But a lot of times, exerting physical energy is my path back, and so I think that's why I enjoy, the physicality of going to the gym, running. This year, I've been bitten by the triathlon bug, so I've done two. I've got another one coming up a week from yesterday. So that'll be three this season. I like I like the physicality, and what I really like is to start a process. I like to research it because it's kind of the nerd inside of me. And then I like to work the process, start at the beginning, experience some of the self-doubt and blame, talk myself through that, past that, and then have achievement, and so I like the journey, I just like the whole process, and so it's a but physicality is a big part of I generally will do exercising at the end of the day because before I come home and I want to spend time with my family, I really want to bring my best self and bring me
Yeah.
and I can bring me if I do that reset button and maybe like throw a barbell around or run a few miles.
I like the barbell part. I'm a martial artist. I would like that part. The running a few miles, I haven't been able to get there. I keep trying. And I know it's a little out of the realm, but I'm curious, like what got you into triathlons? What made you look at that and go, yeah, that's it. Is it your competitive gene? Is it that you like each of the components? What drew you?
I think it's a combination of, I've run my whole life. I ran in high school. I actually swam in high school too, but I've stayed with running the whole time. I've been really into gym time, but at my age, being in my 50s, weights and squats with weights, it's hard on my body as much as I love it. And so I've continued to do the running. And then I just, it's uncharted territory. And although well thought of, and people think you're a badass if you're going to do it, so that
Hmm.
appeals to me in some realm. However, it's not as hard on my body, even though it might seem like it would be, because I'm not even putting my full body weight into myself when I'm doing the biking or the swimming. There's been a lot of challenge about it, no doubt, but it's kinder for a person at my age, and so I feel like I'll have more time and distance. And the fun thing about it, and I don't know if it's true for every triathlon. It's been true for the two that I've done so far. When you do it, they actually write your age on the back of your leg when you're competing.
Oh, wow.
And so when you're there, and I've done so many running events over the years, that's never happened. It's never happened at any competition, but it's right there and it's out there. So as I'm around, I could guess that there are people my age or older, but I can physically register that and see it. It's in the scores too, but I'm seeing it when I'm in the field. I'm seeing it on the back of someone's calf. And so it's reaffirming to me, hey, there's space for me, beyond my
Mhm.
age. I have range. And also, it just makes me feel excited, to just be around people and just kind of have that weird feedback.
So much of what you share there is beautiful. And one of the parts that connects with me is I never thought and never would have thought of that as I do this because it's in some ways easier, right? It gives me extension. It gives me it's less impact and less difficult. When I think of triathlons, yes, I think in general of people who do triathlons as badasses. Now, to be fair, I knew you were one before that. This just adds some asterisks and levels that up a bit. But never in my wildest dreams would I have thought, boy, that's the smoother path. So I love that perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess run what my body feels after a marathon is different. Now, all that to say, I don't envision myself going for a full Ironman.
Okay, that was the next. I was like, how far does this go? Right, all the way down ultras and
I don't know about that. I've been in the sprint range, and that's a great challenge for where I'm at. We'll see. I've been spending some time with the Ann Arbor Triathlon group, so there's certainly some inspiration within that group. So we'll see.
that's awesome. Going back a number of years now, when does that moment that you realized that a banker can change a business owner's life? Like what drew you into banking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I was first trying to figure out my degree program and trying to figure out what I was going to do, accounting seemed like the obvious choice because it's a job and it has a degree associated with it. So that seemed like the degree of choice. But then, I happened upon some people that actually worked in the field of banking and worked as commercial lenders. And what I started to learn was it was going to be a unique blend of problem solving and helping people, which is a big part of, what gets me up in the morning. It's very math and analytically heavy, which is a big part of me. I'm a nerd at heart. And so, and this is maybe a positive and a negative, it was underpopulated for women, so
Mm.
there's not a lot of women in commercial lending roles, but there are a lot of women-owned businesses. There are a lot of women decision makers in business, and there's space for us. And so I guess I just wanted to be one of those people um, that occupied that space.
I love that. I'm curious, in the years that you've been in this space, has women's participation increased? Is that a larger percentage, or are you still feeling pretty lonely out there?
Well, I don't feel lonely, but I do feel I feel unique. I mean, I guess I've worked for a couple of banks in my career so far. The first bank I worked for in Grand Rapids, there were several female commercial lenders there, three in fact, on the lender floor. But I think that's because the business was led by a brother and sister team. So at the very, very top of the house, there was both men and women.
Right.
But at a bank that I spent a lot of time at that no longer exists, a community bank, I was for the longest time the only female commercial lender in all of Lenawee County. When I was working in the county, and so it was easy for me to, I guess make light of it and say, ooh, whoops, if you need to find me, I'm the only woman. I mean,
Right.
I'll be easy to find, and so. That I don't feel that it ever held me back, but it certainly was. It was different. It was always different.
Do you find in general, so about 80% of the clients that I work with are women. Do you find that it easier to connect with one gender or another as you're helping them, or is it, or that they respond differently because you're a woman in the space, or not so much?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, years ago, when we had the economic downturn in 2008 and 2009, there was a lot of, challenge in banking, challenge in business across the board. And, I remember still being a fairly young lender at that time. And I remember sitting across the table from a brother business owner team, and I had to deliver some news that, that was hard for them to take. We were taking precautions. We couldn't take on the risks that they wanted, so we had to kind of manage and counter offer, do things a little different. And in that ownership team, one individual was kind of a steady Eddie, and one was a little bit more emotional, maybe a little even hot-headed. And I remember the hot-headed individual, who is a great friend, still client today, indicated he's like, if you were a man, I'd probably punch you for saying what you said. And so, in that regard, I think although I do have a presence, I do have a job to do, I'm still saying the same things. I think the way it comes across, the way that I am, the relationships that I cultivate, sometimes I can do hard things in a way that still allows it to be a partnership and a collaborative event as opposed to adversarial. And so, I think if people believe you have your best interest at heart and you're not trying to be dominating, which I don't try to dominate, that's not who I am or how I want to come across. I think it might be part of my gender. It might just be who I am. It might just be how people see you because they
Right.
see you as you are. And so it's hard to know
Hard to
what
know where
part
that
I'm
blends
putting
in.
out there. Yeah,
Right.
I don't know what part I'm putting out there, what part other people bring to the table because they're just looking at me and I
No,
look like
I
their
appreciate
wife,
that.
sister, daughter. It's hard to know.
And I'll say this, that you naturally come across as very welcoming and very connecting. You definitely have that vibe that's like nicely in the background of like, don't mess with her. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that. But you're like so connecting, and you navigate conversations artfully. And I'm grateful for that for you. It is one of the things that I've learned a couple turns of phrase from you, and I've seen you take and move this thing over to here. It's a tremendous amount of skill that you have, and I really appreciate that. You've worked in community banks a lot, right? Is
Only
that
community banks,
only community
only
banks,
community
right?
banks.
So why community banks? And what is also on the flip side of that too, what does that mean for the person across the table?
Well, so I think why community banks is, I mean, first of all banks provide a purpose, but community banks, they're really for the local community. A lot of language will say people live, work, and play. What it really means is we have perspective. We live here too, and so I want to work for an organization where they have my best interest in mind. They have the clients in the surrounding areas that I'm working their best interest in mind, and that it can be, if it needs to be, it can be a little customized, for your locality. And so I think what you can expect with a community bank is, instead of a cookie cutter approach, you're going to get a more customized approach, and it's going to be more regionally or community based. And so I think there's huge advantages. We all know that Ann Arbor, I'm sitting to you from my office in Ann Arbor, Michigan is its own unique place. It's very
It
different
is
than,
that.
it's very different than even, other big cities in Michigan, like Detroit or Grand Rapids or Lansing, and so I think it's really important, when I think about who I want to work for, and what they want to put into the community. I think it's really important that we're looking at it from that lens, not necessarily from another state, or even another country.
Yeah, I love that community connection and all that comes with that. Uh, if you're, there are many people in the audience that are probably thinking, yeah, at some point I'm going to need to deal with that. They're a little bit scared, but they're also trying to decide, when do I go talk to somebody in the role that you're in? When's the right time for them to, and what moves something from interesting to actionable for you?
Well, so I mean, I'm always happy to talk to people, even if they don't have, a business in mind, because by the way, I'm just here to, meet people and be where I'm supposed to and meant to be. But for me to really be able to assist people, I provide lending. So, you know, before a lending need occurs, meaning before a big purchase, before a big expansion, before a sale of a business, all those things, all those big business life events are great triggers. And the sooner the better, because think about it this way. If you're going to have a team that's going to help get you through a process, so, I'm going to be on the financing part of the team. Do you want to be thrown on the field with that team when you're immediately starting, or do you want to already know that person and have an opportunity to get to know them maybe a little bit before? And by the way, if they are a subject matter expert and it's not their first time down this journey, but it's yours, wouldn't you rather, before you've made a couple of decisions, wouldn't you rather have a conversation? And so I say that there's no bad time to establish the relationship. I think what people really don't realize about banking, because it's often treated as a commodity. Yeah, I can get a checking account anywhere. Yeah, I can get a mortgage anywhere. Yes, I could, on the internet or even work through a broker. I could find it anywhere. It doesn't have to be nearby. It doesn't have to be somebody I'd ever meet. But what if you had a question that wasn't, a well-worn path? Or what if you had something specific, because we all are unique and we all have unique needs? Well, if you don't want something cookie cutter, then you need to have a relationship, and it needs to be somebody that you can talk to, and
Yeah.
so I'm not the right person for everyone, because I'm me, and so I'm going to deliver me. I'm going to customize it for you, but in the end, it's going to be me.
Right.
And so, but you need to have your person, whoever that is, to deliver your approach, so they can be your
Right.
advocate and you're in on your journey.
Relationships are everything. It's my number one core value. People matter most. Relationships are everything. And what I'm hearing is that that's not only what you're all about, but it's what makes the most sense objectively as well. As people are listening, one of the things that I think they get caught up in a lot of times is, well, I'm, what mistakes do I need not to make? Is there a single misstep that makes approvals harder that you would call out to say, hey, if you're gonna do one thing, don't do this or do this that would help make their lives easier as they are getting ready to come and get to know you?
Well, I think maybe there's a handful of things.
Okay.
Probably the biggest thing is make sure that you have, your house in order. You're on top of your financials. You're filing currently. You're not behind. You're paying your taxes. You're paying your bills. You're managing your personal credit. Make sure you're on top of all those things. If you're doing something that's an expansion or a new start of some kind, and you need to do a projections, you need to do some future forecasting, do it yourself. Have the courage to get support from an accountant or somebody who's good with numbers if that's not you. But understand all of your information inside and out because it has to be an extension of you. The drivers and the assumptions have to come from you in your experience. Anyone can take a spreadsheet and do times 1.1 times 1.2. That is that's really just garbage. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not helping me understand the business itself and the impact that you expect to have
What
within it.
what's the tapestry, right? And if you're working with someone and you have a relationship with them and you go through a process and you get the unfortunate news that the answer is no at that moment, what do you recommend that they do in the next 24 hours?
Well, I don't know if it's in the next 24 hours, but I always want to check in with people because a lot of times, because that's the goal. I mean, the goal is not, gosh, do you think I could ever do it? The goal usually when people are working with me is, could I do it right now?
Right.
I mean, could
Right.
I do
Of
it right now?
course.
Could I really do it yesterday? Because they've got big plans and big ideas. And so, first of all, we want to make sure that people hear the good and the needs improvements because there's always a reason, right? And so the reason can be something that exists in someone's personal past or some kind of personal shortcoming. It can be the support of the project, like the tangible collateral behind it. It could be the industry. It could be a lot of different things, and so what we want to make sure is that people understand, hey, this is the answer right now. Here's why. And here's what you could do about it if you agreed that you need to work on it. Or they can also ask someone else who does what I do, for feedback, because the answer and the risk tolerance across banks can vary.
Right.
There are certain things that are very universal, but my answer is not everyone's answer. And so people are entitled to, seek for the yes. I'm just going to give it to them straight as it relates to my experience, my position, and as it relates to what we can do at Bank Michigan, which is where I currently work.
Beautiful. When we step forward and think about calm and clarity and all you deal with a lot of high stakes moments and maybe it feels like it sometimes and other times it doesn't, but I can speak as a person who has gone and tried to get loans in the past, some successfully, some not over my lifetime. What helps you, or what would you encourage to help others stay calm when money and timelines feel tight? I'm sure you deal with tight timelines occasionally, right?
I do. Actually, earlier this week, I had a conversation, kind of around that very thing. I guess first and foremost, sometimes deadlines really are hard deadlines, but sometimes they are artificial. So sometimes, like in my world, a lot of times a purchase agreement can drive a deadline.
Right.
So you've got a seller that says, close by X date. You've got a buyer that's jazzed about closing by X date. That's, so that's what everybody's pointing for. But the reality is, what if there are legitimate reasons? Everybody's working hard. What if there are legitimate reasons that timeline needs to be expanded? Um, is it reasonable, for the stakeholders in that transaction, the bank, the buyer, the seller, realtors, if they're involved, others, accountants, is it reasonable for everybody to say, hey, first of all, evaluating, is everybody efforting towards that date in earnest? Are people really efforting and doing the hard work? But if the answer is yes, and then expanded time is needed legitimately, um, not fighting that,
Right.
recognizing that. And I think having the courage to talk about it in those terms, having the courage from the beginning to say, hey, your preferred timeline is or isn't, realistic based on where we're sitting right now, and then building a plan together that is manageable in a timeline that is manageable. So take out, as many of the artificial or extra stresses as you possibly can. Oh, sorry. So that you can focus on the ones that really you can't get past. And that way it gives
Yeah.
you the energy. It's like anything in your personal or professional life. Everything can't be an emergency. So really identifying, which things can be, should be, are an emergency, which things are non-negotiable, and which things, really could fit into a reasonable plan that works for everybody in the transaction, and
I,
so just
I
really being mindful of
I
that.
really like that, getting rid of these what are almost fictional deadlines. And I encounter that when I have clients who say, I'm launching on this day, and they get behind and they start feeling stressed. I say, have you told anybody? Well, no. Like, why are you launching on that day? Because that's the day I want to. I'm like, okay, but is that real? And do you have reasons that maybe that should change? And that release truly does add to their sense of calm. It clears the board, and the more we can clear the board, the less overwhelming it is. When you think about kind of a little bit of a different angle into that world, when you get numbers that are messy, you said earlier, hey, make sure your house is in order. I'm certain not every house that you get shown is in order. When the numbers are messy, how do you find clarity?
Well, so I mean, meaning, how do I communicate that to someone
How do you
else,
communicate it,
or
or how do you create clarity out of chaos?
like just drudge through it? Well, I mean, I think years of experience, I can certainly drudge through it. Some things you have to, even though it might hurt their feelings, sometimes you have to tell people, hey, this just isn't good enough, and this isn't representative of what we've requested. So, we can't get there from here with the product
Mhm.
that you're providing. And so, sometimes it's just having those hard conversations. But for me, I think just taking the time to see what's really there,
Yeah.
and then determining if I can work with it. I'm not trying to be difficult. And so if there's a way that I can work with something that's not quite perfect for me, but still has content, I'm not going to be a jerk about it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's not just me that I have to be thinking about. I work
Right.
on a team. And so when I think about myself and the team and the deadlines and the performance that people want to hold us accountable for, both the client side and internally, management and ultimately our shareholders. I mean, there's a right way and a wrong way to get there on the timeline that we expect to get there, and it
Right.
means it means people might need to enlist outside support, and invest in themselves and invest some time to get it right so that they can move forward on a good foundation.
Yeah, I like that willingness to step in. And you've talked about courage from different angles. And I courage creates calm, courage enables clarity, all of those. You're willing to have those difficult conversations. And I hear you as you describe it, willing to have them with others, sometimes probably willing to have them with yourself. Like, okay, I've gotta engage and process that. And I'm guessing that comes up a little bit even around focus as well. You have crowded weeks, and you may or may not feel that. If you, I'm guessing if you did less than 35 things in a day, it might feel a little empty. But you do a lot, right? You're gardening and you're running and you're doing you're doing work and you're a wife and all that. How do you maintain focus to get individual things done in your crowded weeks, in your crowded life? Like, what is there a habit that you have that helps you focus, or is it a skill? What is it?
So I have a couple of, definitely not a skill. I use tools. So what I have is tools and discipline. And so, what I try to do is I try to think about the different aspects of me. So there's the Michelle, like me, things just for me. And so I'm going to focus on those things and advancing those personal goals every day. And so every morning when I wake up, I'll determine two or three things that I'm going to do just for me. Just for me. And then I have the work related to do's, the must do's. So I'm going to balance all of those things. And then I might have some household to-dos that are not for me, they're on my to-do list. There's a big difference between me going for a run because it gives me calm and it helps me stay energized and it helps me bring myself to the world versus vacuuming the house. I mean,
Right.
there's a world of difference between those two things, and
Yes.
so the vacuuming is not just for me, even though I benefit.
And one might be a little more enjoyable than the other too.
Most definitely, most definitely. But yeah, so and I picked up a habit of I'll put the to-dos. I use like a very low tech version within my Outlook, and people that have worked with me and have access to my calendar will laugh because from a task perspective, I put a lot of follow-up related things, admin related tasks, but they're all F \U. So anybody that has access to my calendar, the question comes up. I just ran into a colleague when I was up in Sheboygan a couple weeks ago, and she's like, you know what? I actually put that on my calendar now. So I'm infecting others with some of my tools.
Oh, that's awesome. That says they're effective, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I think she said it just makes her laugh and makes her think of me, also, which I think is, that's wonderful.
That's a good thing. Well, that's how some of us out here find calm and clarity is we get to smile and think of you. So that is a positive as well. When you think back, you've had, I would assume, hundreds, if not thousands, of different clients. Is there a time that stands out to you, maybe a real client moment that is poignant, or where that business hit a wall and you were able to either work with them or something, it took something extraordinary or a little different that moved it forward and got them around a wall?
Yeah. So at the bank I'm at now, I inherited a portfolio. And what's interesting about the work that I do is, it's very personal, it's relationships, right? And so
Right.
when you inherit a portfolio, you inherit a bunch of relationships that might not fit your personality or your skill set at all. They're just have the service and they happen to bank with you. And so, as luck would have it, I inherited a portfolio from someone who was just approaches couldn't be more different.
Right.
And I inherited some that were performing and some that, just hit walls and weren't performing. And one in particular, um, I just, I knew that the person, I believed that the person was a good person, but they were showing me a lot of hostility and a lot of frustration because I wasn't giving them what they wanted, which
Right.
was they just wanted me to say yes. They didn't want me to say, let's do it different, let's crack it open, let's recreate it. And they definitely didn't want me to say no or
Right.
find another friend. And so, I did a little bit test of the water first just to see, okay, could I figure anything out? And I remember we were doing all paper files at the time. So this is a while back. And I had like every file folder. This person had four different businesses. I had every file folder like out on my desk on a Friday afternoon. And I kind of look buried, like maybe people might not be able to see me. And I was just trying to think, like, if I had to start over and they were a brand new client, didn't have to think about anything. I wanted them. I wanted them, to become a client, and I would do anything to get it. What could I do? And so I try to, kind of step out of the current kind of problematic situation and try to see if it could be an opportunity. And, I came up with my best work and presented it. And I said, look, this is not an ultimatum, but it's either this difficult path that you can't get past it, or I have this idea. It involves, it involves a lot of change. But this is how I think we can make a change now and start to turn the corner. And it worked so well that years later, that individual is still a client, and then recently sold to his son-in-law, who remained a client.
Wow.
Even after they recovered, they didn't shop us because we worked through a problem. Even though I still think I wasn't probably, as a person in construction-based field, I still think I wasn't probably the person they would have naturally gravitated to for a variety of reasons. But there was some loyalty there,
Right.
after having that journey, being respected, being given a choice. And then, once he made the choice that he made, which was opt in, cooperate, then I made the choice to, defend him, work with him.
I love that. And it highlights this has come up, I think, 5 or 6 times in our conversation. You have this beautiful ability to, you're in a situation and you start feeling stuck, and you have this beautiful ability to look back and say, what if we were 2 or 3 steps earlier? What if we go back? What if we question the assumptions we made to get here? And that's come up as a pattern for you throughout our conversation. And I love that that is the case and that you do it. But I would also highlight to our audience that that's probably a pretty good piece of advice to ask, what assumptions have I made? Where am I? Why am I here? And it bridges to the next thing I want to ask you, which is, if you have a small business owner who's feeling stuck listening to this, what is the single best step they can take there that you would encourage them? If you meet them and maybe they're not even all the way ready for lending, but they're feeling stuck, what would you tell them?
I think if you're feeling stuck as a business owner, or doesn't just have to be that, but if you're feeling stuck, I think it's always helpful to step back and say, what are the one or two things that I could do today, this week, this month, that would move my business forward and, would have the biggest impact? And if you find yourself saying, I don't have the time to do that, reevaluate why you're in the position that you're in, reevaluate who you have working for you, and how you can delegate, but find the space to make sure that the most important things that are going to have the biggest impact are getting done. They're not just getting shuffled to the side, and so just make room for, not necessarily just vision, but make room for impact. Just don't get busy being busy. Get busy doing things that matter. I mean, just that's how you're going to get there. And having, conquering your day, being in charge of your day. I'm not literally always in charge of my day, but I like to think that I am, but being in charge of your day is going to give you the confidence to do harder things, because it's going to make you feel empowered. That's important. You have to feel, um, you don't always have to feel motivated. I think you just have to feel like you could meet the challenge, that you're ready for it. And so just, you know, trust your vision, trust that you are right, make adjustments as needed, but get out there and do the things that need to get done. Don't be afraid to get started doing the things that need to get done. Don't make excuses. Just do it.
I think you've got like 4 different T-shirts right in there of really good
I
quotes.
like a statement tee.
Right, yes, make room for impact might be the first one. That's resonating in my head. That's so powerful. All of that message is, when you think about bankers in the world, right? There are a lot of conceptions and misconceptions. What's the biggest misconception about bankers that you wish more people understood or saw differently?
The a lot of people will say bankers, particularly lenders, only lend money to people that don't need it. And I think I think that's unfair. I think how I would love for people to look at it is, lenders lend money when they can see a demonstrated track record that they could have a repayment back. And so I think we're not necessarily trying to lend people back their own money. You don't have to necessarily have a CD in the bank for an equal amount and we'll lend you back with interest. It's not that. Uh, but there has to be a managed risk equation. We're in the risk management business, uh, but we're not necessarily, although we can be friends and we might be family and we do care about our clients. It's a business transaction and it has to be risk managed.
I think that's a powerful understanding, and my version of that is basically I know a lot of bankers who are really good people, but that doesn't mean they're not business people, and it's unfair to expect them not to be. And it's I yeah, I, you're incredible. I know several others who are wonderful people, but you've got a job to do just like everyone else.
Well, and you know what's funny too, just to tag on that, I've had people say to me, "Hey, after the fact, hey, I'm glad that you said no because, I figured if you didn't think it was a good idea, then neither did I."
Right.
And so sometimes people are looking for us to be the litmus test,
The
the bad,
guardrail,
the
right?
bad guy, the guardrail. I mean, sometimes people are like, "Well, someone else will tell me if I can't. I'm just gonna start my engine," and that's not knowing. And I've had clients say that. I've had coworkers that are, maybe championing for a loan, and they're coming to me for my approval authority, and they didn't engage their thought process and make a recommendation. They're looking for me to do that work. They weren't ready to exercise their authority. But I think it's always important to, you know, at least be real with yourself about, gosh, if it wasn't me, maybe you're invested, you put all your thoughts and hopes and dreams into it. But if it wasn't me, would this really make sense to an outside audience?
Right.
That's not me, my spouse, my mom, like, would it make sense,
That's
if in an arm's length transaction? And how could you present it in a way that would help people to that yes, to that understanding to say yes?
Yeah, when I'm training sales, one of the things that I share with everyone is the very first person who has to buy who has to buy is you. But what that really means that one of the ways when we talk about are you perceiving value is if you put yourself in the place of someone else, would you buy this? Right.
Yeah.
And that's really what you're saying is get outside of your perspective and ask, does this make objective sense? Not subjective, it's my baby, I love it and I want it and I'm desperate for it, but does it make objective sense? And that can clear the head quite a bit. As we begin to wrap up our conversation, I have a couple of questions around legacy and message. First one, if you think 20 years from now, what would you hope if someone began the sentence, Michelle meant this to me, how would they finish it? Or Michelle accomplished this. How would you want that sentence to finish?
Well, um, I would hope that people would say, Michelle was honest, Michelle was helpful, Michelle was kind, but Michelle was not afraid to call me out on what I needed to hear. I would always want it to have that backdrop that, I'm not the yes person or the person that's just going to nod. I'm going to tell you if you got toilet paper hanging from your shoe. I'm going to tell you if you've got food in your teeth. I'm going to tell you if, it's not the best work, that you need to work harder or push harder. I'm going to do it with kindness because I do care and I wouldn't spend time on someone that, that I didn't honestly care about the outcome. But I care so much that I'd want to be honest.
And I think that's beautiful. As we bridge from that to our audience, what is from whether it be from what we've talked about or something we haven't covered, what message would you want our listeners to carry into this week as they go forward from this conversation?
Just about me or just to set their tone for their week?
Take your pick, whatever you feel that they need to hear. If you want to leave them a last note, it can be a challenge and encouragement. Take your pick. But what message do you want them to carry forth from this?
Well, I would say, for me, I wake up every morning, reminding myself that I matter so many other people in my life matter, that I matter, and that the things that are truly important to me matter. And so as I think about all of my friends and family, and I think about all the clients that I work with and how easy it is to get putting other people's priorities in front of yours, I would just say the number one thing that you can do for yourself and your own happiness is to make sure when you get out of bed, you know what you want to accomplish that day, and don't let the busyness of your life get in the way.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me today, Michelle. You are fantastic, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity to share your light in the world. I would say to those who are listening, if you haven't connected with her, especially if you're in Southeast Michigan, do so. Click the links, find a way to connect. In fact, I'll ask, what is the best way to get in touch with you? I realize now that I didn't ask that earlier, so I will now. What's the best way to get in touch with you, Michelle?
Well, probably email. You can find me at michelle.brasser@bankmichigan.bank. If that's too much to remember, all my contact information is on our website on Bank Michigan. You can find me there. And the cell phone that's attached there is my personal and work cell. So
Awesome.
love to talk to anybody who has questions. Thank you.
If you're in Southeast Michigan, especially if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you may at some point, even if it isn't right now, have lending needs, this is the woman for you. And for everyone that has taken the time to be here, thank you so much. You are why we exist. You are why we are doing what we do. If you can think of someone who needs to hear this message, this conversation, might be encouraged by it, please share it with them. And until next week, I would say this: be well, breathe well, and continue to shine brightly, my friends.